Today on the show, we've got one of the most consequential members of Congress that most Americans have never even heard of. And honestly, that's probably by design. Because while cable news spends every waking hour chasing the same 5 senators and the same social media influencers pretending to run the country, there are a handful of people behind the scenes who actually sit near the levers of power. One of those people is Congressman Rick Crawford. Now, let's be honest here. Arkansas is not California. It's not Texas. It's not Florida. Arkansas has barely over 3 million people, and Rick Crawford represents Arkansas's 1st congressional district, a deeply rural district most national political operatives couldn't find on a map. And yet this guy now chairs the House Intelligence Committee. That means while the media is obsessed over polling averages or whatever insane thing somebody posted on X today, Rick Crawford has been sitting in the room overseeing the intelligence community while working directly with outgoing DNI Tulsi Gabbard during one of the most politically volatile periods in modern American history, and some might say American history, period. And according to Crawford, Tulsi Gabbard wasn't just another figurehead sitting in a nice office collecting a title. No, he says she was the first DNI who actually tried to exercise authority over the intelligence apparatus instead of merely coexisting with it. That's a massive statement. So today, we're going to talk about Crawford's work with Gabbard on declassification efforts, the growing fight inside the intelligence community, the institutional resistance inside Washington, and why he believes permanent bureaucratic power, what most Americans simply call the deep state, has become embedded inside the federal government itself. We also got into the Senate logjam, the collapse of the constitutional filibuster into what Crawford basically describes as a paperwork exercise, the political fallout from Republicans who voted to impeach President Donald Trump, and the ongoing debate over election security legislation like the SAVE Act. And yes, again, we talked about the intel agencies. Crawford openly discusses the first Trump impeachment, Eric CIA Ramella, Alexander Vindman, Adam Schiff, James Comey, John Brennan, and what he believes was an organized effort by elements inside the intelligence community and law enforcement apparatus to politically cripple Trump's presidency, something this audience is very familiar with. What you are about to watch is the sitting chairman of the House Intelligence Committee offering a glimpse of how power actually functions inside Washington. And frankly, one of the most fascinating parts of the conversation was hearing Crawford explain how these agencies operate almost like overlapping kingdoms with embeds, detailees, shared systems, and permanent institutional loyalties that survive presidential administrations. At one point, he even explained how the Office of the Director of National Intelligence still operates on CIA infrastructure. Specifically, he reveals that the DNI operates on CIA-controlled computer systems. Think about that for just a second. The agency supposedly overseeing the intelligence community is sharing systems with one of the agencies it oversees. That alone tells you a lot about how Washington really works and provides a potential explanation for why the CIA has apparently been successful in resisting Tulsi Gabbard's efforts to expose the truth. And somehow, after all of that, talk about coups, impeachment, bureaucratic warfare, intelligence oversight, Ukraine, Comey, Brennan, and the future of the American administrative state, the interview ends with hot rotisserie chicken. And honestly, it may have been the most bipartisan issue discussed in Congress all year. Apparently, Washington has decided you can buy a cold rotisserie chicken with SNAP benefits, but not a hot one. Because nothing says efficient government quite like a federal bureaucracy trying to determine the constitutional status of chicken based entirely on temperature. So today on the Paul Harrell program, Congressman Rick Crawford joins us to talk about all of it: the intelligence wars, Tulsi Gabbard's legacy, the institutional battle happening inside government, and yes, the great rotisserie chicken rebellion of 2026. The Paul Harrell program starts right now. Congressman Rick Crawford is with us. Rick, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Better than I deserve.
It's great to have you back. Let me start with the first question. Could the two of us possibly be looking at the next director of national intelligence?
Hit you right out of the gate there,
wow.
Congressman.
Didn't expect that one. I'm telling you, I love doing my job. I love the position I'm in now. If President Trump called me and said, hey, I need you to do this job, who knows what's likely to happen. But I'm thrilled with the job that I have now, and I'm not looking for a new one.
And you've been on that committee 2018. Is that when you first joined?
2017.
2017.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So almost 10 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Being the chair of it now, it would seem only logical, to be looked at hard for that position.
Well, here's probably something to consider too. Our margin in the House is one vote.
Yeah.
That could really throw things into a major uproar, which is why I think it's probably not likely. I mean, I can't imagine that, if the president called me up, hey, I need you to be DNI, and then Speaker Johnson is going to be like, Mr. President, you're insane. Mm-hmm. So those dynamics will probably govern that decision.
Okay. So, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, we've been talking about this for a long time. She is certainly seems to be a consistent bright spot in the administration when it comes to exposing the truth, the, Intel oligarchy kind of revealed. And she's really done, from what we can see, she's turning everything over, criminal referrals to the DOJ, that sort of thing. Obviously, the last time you were on the program about 6 months ago, we were talking about your work with her, uncovering the fact that, hey, look, you had this report that showed that Obama basically ordered a fake intel assessment, framed President Trump for treason and everything else. So talk a little bit about Tulsi Gabbard. I know you released a statement, but also you worked with her recently again to reveal information about the fake
right.
impeachment,
exactly.
How that was a hoax.
Yeah, we had sort of I guess you might call it somewhat of a battle rhythm. We were working closely together on some things. She's a great partner, and I just personally, this is a loss for us. I think in the Intel community, I think she was doing the things that the president campaigned on, and was giving me the space to be able to partner with her on those things that I campaigned on, along with the president. This is what Republicans said we were going to do. If you give us power, here's what we'll do. And the deep state is so entrenched that it's very, very difficult. And the stuff's not going to happen immediately, but we were making great progress. We came out of the gate, as you recall. We came out early on and pushing for the release of those documents. And I hurt some feelings and ruffled some feathers in the process of it, but not hers. She was a willing partner, and she gladly received that information and was able to declassify and get that information out to the American people, which they needed to see.
Can you tell us which feathers were ruffled?
People in the IC, that felt like, I was being too aggressive, or, there's sort of this built-in institutional pushback against oversight. That's part of the entrenchment of the bureaucrats that reside in the deep state. That's what we're there to upend. And, made some people mad. That's okay. I answer to you, I answer to you, I answer to the people in the 1st District that sent me there to do those very things. So if it hurts your feelings, sorry, not sorry. That's my job.
Wow. Well, speaking of, just a question that it's been, sort of a frustration, I think, with conservatives or Republicans in that, given the House, given the Senate, given the presidency, and there just seems to be this never-ending logjam, especially right now in the Senate, and there's just a lot of frustration. We're seeing right now just constant, people that if Trump's not for you right now, you probably are going to lose your primary. And I just don't know if that's sending a strong enough message to Senate Majority Leader Thune there. How would you classify the logjam, and are y'all having conversations in the House on what you can do to help alleviate that?
Well, this logjam, there's a legislative logjam, and certainly there's a political construct to that, somewhat of a political dynamic, and we can unpack that if you want. But there's also the institutional logjam that exists that is created by politicians, and here's why. I don't know who was the first one to do this. I'm not trying to blame any particular president, but when you take your appointees and the last thing you do as you leave office is take them off your senior executive schedule and put them as a GS in the bureaucracy, they're now there forever. I mean, it's like somebody's got to commit murder practically, and then you might even be able to get away with that before you can be terminated as a federal employee. It's not easy to terminate a federal employee. So it's very often the case that as the last thing that an executive does, a president does on their way out, is to populate those middle management positions and put them on the GS so that it's harder for them to be moved. Now you've got your operatives in those bureaus that are there as long as they want to be. That's a hard thing to overcome.
Right.
And so, again, I don't know who was the first president to do that, but it happens all the time, and that's how you create the deep state. It's been going on for a long, long time, and those individuals end up as sort of permanent fixtures in a given agency. And we tend to think about the deep state as the national security complex, that is the IC, the Department of War, that kind of thing. And it's just, it permeates every agency. And USDA. I mean, when you've got individuals that work for USDA that are espousing DEI initiatives and the kind of the woke stuff that they're trying to incorporate into the workplace, that's a hard thing to overcome. And they're there. They're not just the appointees. They're helping the appointees, as the case may be, or they may be pushing back against the appointees, for example, the Trump administration, or they're encountering all these what were political appointees but that are now full-fledged, civil servant bureaucrats that are all in for example, the Obama agenda or the Biden agenda. So,
well, this wasn't on our list of questions to ask here, Paul, but just kind of following up in that vein, do you think the Save America Act has any chance?
You would think after what happened in Texas last night, that should be the clarion call.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is pretty much a 75% issue, which means you've got a significant number of Democrats that are agreeing. And yet, for whatever reason, John Thune has refused to address it. Bill Cassidy, out of the pool. John Cornyn, he's gone. Tom Tillis is punched out, and
he seemed not to have the courage to even run.
Right. He knew the handwriting was on the wall for him, and there may be some others. My point is, this is easy. This is something that at least 75% of the American people say, yes, let's do this. What's the holdup?
Right.
What's the problem? And then they hide behind this filibuster rule. Okay, I understand. I don't serve in the Senate, and I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of their, arcane rules. But I'm not sure they know the ins and outs of their rules. But what we do know is that the filibuster has become nothing more than an administrative act. Yeah. It's not a physical act like it used to be and what it was intended to be. And that is to say, I don't like this piece of legislation. I'm going to physically go to the floor, and I'm going to block it by my voice. I'm going to stand there in the well, and I'm going to speak till I drop. Rarely does that happen. And there have been times in history when you had people that would go down to the floor and just read the Bible, because they don't have to say anything. They just have to claim the time and speak. So they'll find anything in the world to read so that they're consuming their time and making that point that we're going to stop. Now it's like they just go filibuster.
Yeah.
And then leadership goes, oh, okay, he said filibuster, so we have to capitulate. What about making them actually do it instead of, an administrative box-checking exercise?
I think that's the government that we're entitled to as Americans, and it kind of dawned on us a couple of months ago when the talk about the filibuster was at its height, and I realized the average age of these senators on both the left and the right, pulling a 24-hour or 48-hour might put them in the hospital, some of these guys. And I don't say that as trying to be mean. Mm-hmm. I'm saying if you look at some of these, the job with the original filibuster, the way it was meant to, and it was meant to have a robust debate and have, guys that are able to physically do the job. And so it kind of dawned on me, some of these guys physically aren't capable of doing that.
Well, 100%. And that's part of the deal, okay? If you are physically incapable of actually going down to the well of the Senate floor and engaging in the physical filibuster, then maybe you need to think differently about what they've done. They've made a special accommodation for folks that, well, maybe he's got a problem that he can't stay on the floor for more than 30 minutes. Well, we'll just go ahead and he claimed the right of filibuster, so therefore we'll recognize that and acknowledge it. Well, then everybody's doing it that way.
Yeah, sure.
So does the filibuster exist or does it not? And my way of thinking is it does not exist anymore. What they're doing is no longer a filibuster. It's an administrative objection that's being sanctioned by our leadership. The majority is saying, okay, you said filibuster, so that's good enough. That's a problem. Yeah. And look, if you're not for nuking the filibuster, okay, then just make it work. And I guarantee you, if you actually make the filibuster work, fewer and fewer people will invoke filibuster, because if they know that this actually requires an action, they're not going to do that because they don't want to miss a fundraising dinner or whatever,
That's good. Us we conservatives, we can't predict the future here, but it just. I don't know if it's call it a black pill or just call it a pessimistic view of it, but we just feel like there's no chance that Chuck Schumer won't nuke the filibuster when he gets back into power, because I think there's just going to be an immense pressure on him from the far left.
The evidence was Harry Reid. Mm-hmm. Harry Reid did it. I mean, and then, we acted like we were surprised by that. We shouldn't be surprised by that, and I think everybody knows, going to nuke the filibuster. They say they're going to do things. Believe if they get in power, that's what they're going to try to do, because they've demonstrated it time and time again. Yeah. They say they want to expand the Supreme Court. If they get in power, that's what they're going to attempt to do. If they say they want to nuke the filibuster and they get in power, that's what they're going to do. And you know what? The only way to prevent that from happening is a preemptive nuking of the filibuster. That is to say, if you're going to claim the right of the filibuster as the minority and then turn around and promise to get rid of the filibuster when you're in the majority, that's a problem. And you should probably just say, well, guess what? We're just going to make you, force you, if you're going to, exercise a filibuster, it's actually going to be a physical filibuster. It's not going to be a paper transaction.
And we may be naive about it, Congressman, but from our perspective, if two things were to happen, these redistricting attempts continue to be successful. We suffered a setback there in Alabama. We'll see if that holds up if it goes to the Supreme Court. But with the redistricting and all of that, and then the Save America Act, where of course, people are going to continue to find workarounds to it, right? But if they're having to actually produce that identification and prove that they are a United States citizen, we've got all of these blue states that are issuing driver's licenses to non-citizens coming across the border. Here's your driver's license, here's your Medicaid card, all of this stuff, right? It's very frustrating. Those two things give conservatives a lot of hope that, hey, this is not going to be a bloodbath in November, that hopefully we can still hold these chambers and we can get this log jam undone here because that filibuster is out of the way.
Yeah.
I know we're talking a lot about the Senate there, but it's just it's just very frustrating, and we're seeing the fallout there with Cassidy. I think Cassidy was a sitting duck as soon as he voted for the impeachment.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, here's the thing, and I know Cassidy. I've known him for a long time. I don't know him well, never really worked closely with him. But what I'll say about him and several others, when they made the decision to vote yes on impeachment, the calculation was this will be the end of Trump, and it'll be the end of MAGA.
Perfect segue.
And so it'll be safe for me to do this. I'll be protected because on the other side of this, people will go, what a hero. He helped end, the reign of Trump and MAGA and all this. And they thought they were taking this principled stand, convinced that Trump was never coming back. This was going to lead to the complete and utter removal of him and anybody who followed him. And this was sort of a reclamation of the GOP and their image. They didn't calculate on what the people thought.
Yeah.
They didn't calculate on him having the ability and what he was saying, having the long-term resonance with the American people. Gross miscalculation. He's not the only one. There's some House members that suffered the same fate, and there may be one or two senators that are still to go. But this was one of the most egregious. This was done specifically because he thought he could outlast Trump.
And this was the second impeachment, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The January 6th.
Right, which, of course, I think a lot of Americans believe that it was just a giant effort to squash populism and make sure Trump could never run again. We now, have the information about the plainclothes FBI agents that were in the crowd. A lot of people just they don't believe it was as bad as 9/11, like some of the Democrats said. It just comes across now as, and there's a reason that term Fedsurrection comes up. There's a lot of people that still have a ton of questions about it, and given people being given guided tours of the Capitol, that sort of thing. So the whole thing just stinks to high heaven. And but I think the impeachment question kind of goes back to the first impeachment. So let's talk about that, okay? I think it's incredibly coincidental. I think God has a sense of humor that this guy, Eric, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Charmella. Well, I pronounce it CIA Ramella because literally CIA is in the first three letters of this guy's name. So Eric CIA Ramella, tell us about these new revelations that the first impeachment was essentially bogus. There was no evidence. There's a criminal referral. Even an inspector general's been referred to the DOJ for prosecution over this. And, of course, your favorite guy, Adam Schiff, is involved as well.
Yeah. So lots going on there. This guy, Eric Charmella, he was given whistleblower status. There's a reason why that whistleblower statute exists to protect individuals who are coming to Congress with real information that's necessary for us to engage in our Article 1 oversight authority. So we are sensitive about the protection of whistleblowers. In this case, I don't think he was a legitimate whistleblower. I think this was an op. He was involved with Adam Schiff. I think he was being handled. I don't know if he was being handled by Adam Schiff. I don't know what Adam Schiff is capable of handling, but he was involved with Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, I believe, as well. And that is how we got the first Trump impeachment. And this was done. There were a couple other people involved. One of these guys is now running for Senate in Florida, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. By the way, his twin brother is a member of Congress from Virginia. And you want to talk about a scumbag of the lowest order, both of them, in my opinion, are. And Vindman was one of these that was brought in to talk about, that he was present during this, phone call in question and all this other kind of stuff. So this was what they were going to do, is characterize this phone call that Trump had with Zelensky, and that was out of bounds. But they didn't say anything about Joe Biden basically holding $1 billion over the head of Ukraine based on having their one of their political appointees fired, or we're going to withhold the money. So nothing was ever said about that, but they focused in on President Trump and that obsession. And of course, that was the essence of his first impeachment. Complete and utter fabrication. And keep in mind also, we're dealing with Zelensky. I mean, I can give you my assessment of Zelensky. which also sort of makes me question the validity of this impeachment move, because Zelensky is as corrupt as anybody. And there are a whole lot of Ukrainian oligarchs that have gotten rich as a result of Zelensky being the president of Ukraine. But he is our corrupt guy because he's standing up against Putin. So therefore, he's our guy. You see the problem that we have here?
Yeah.
So I've had a problem with the whole Ukraine. I don't want to see Ukraine fall to the Russians. I tend to call them reflexively the Soviets, because the reason I say that they don't exist anymore except in Putin's mind, because he is a Cold War Soviet spy that is trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. May not call it the Soviet Union, but he's trying to rebuild that former greatness of the Soviet Union. And it starts with Ukraine for a variety of reasons. Number one, his mother's Ukrainian. A lot of people don't know that. Believe it or not, agriculture has a lot to do with Ukraine and the value to the Soviet Union in the previous iteration of that empire. So from Russian perspective, it enhances their ability for food security to have this vital and prolific ag region under their control. There's a lot of considerations. Their access to the Black Sea, all those kinds of things, vital to the expansion of Russia. And Russia has throughout history been sort of a xenophobic type country where they have surrounded themselves by satellite states for protection. Heck, their Kremlin is built that way. I mean, it's all part of their history, and the Soviet Union built on that, and they created these Soviet republics. And you see now Ukraine is one of them. That's a former Soviet republic, along with others that have broken away, and some, like Poland, have embraced capitalism and have moved to the West and have moved to the United States. Ukraine kind of did, but that just really did not sit well with Putin, going back to 2014 when he essentially annexed Crimea without ever having to fire a shot. And what did President Obama do? He provided blankets to the Ukrainians. Not necessarily bad to have blankets, but not necessarily what you would qualify as a defensive application, unless you were going to smother Russian soldiers that were coming across the border. Then it probably wouldn't be a very effective weapon. So you get my point. And then so President Trump comes in, has a conversation with Zelensky, and that conversation is characterized by Eric Chermella and validated by Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, and now we've got an impeachment on our hands.
Yeah.
And that's what that whole thing was predicated
I
on.
remembered Vindman was constantly going on CNN, MS Now. He would always wear his military garb when he would go on there, had the glasses.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessary.
By the way, you don't wear a uniform in the White House. Now, you do have military that do wear uniforms. Mm-hmm. They are typically there as sort of White House aides. They serve kind of like hosts. Mm-hmm. So you'll see uniformed military lower, generally going to be 03s and below. And then the enlisted ranks, obviously the Marines that are guards and so on. But this is a guy who was on the National Security Council. Those guys don't wear uniforms. But it was important to him that when he showed up to the Intel hearing, that he showed up in uniform.
Theater.
Right.
Yes, because he wanted to make sure that everybody knew that, by gosh, he's a lieutenant colonel. And he even attempted to dress down Devin Nunes. When Devin Nunes referred to him as Mr. Vindman, he said, "Excuse me, I am Colonel Vindman." Mm-hmm. And I just said, if it were me, you don't even want to get me started on that.
Yeah.
Because that was done to remind everybody that, because he's military, he is above reproach.
Yeah.
Bull.
Back to the phone call, though. There was also something, there's a lot of people that think that the content of that phone call, what he was impeached over, wasn't actually what made the Intel oligarchy upset, because President Trump did mention CrowdStrike having the server, the DNC server, and I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
No, I mean, there were a number of pretexts, for that action, and it's hard to keep track of all of them because they were just grasping at straws to try to be able to pull together some viable impeachment proceeding. And
yeah, well, it makes you wonder too if it wasn't so much about the question he was asking, it was fear of the rabbit trail that he was about to go down. Like, would that answer lead him to something else?
Possibly.
And gone down there.
And this was also right after the Russia collusion hoax. You had Mueller, who had already testified, I believe. He was, just, and it was a big nothing burger. And so then this phone call, fake impeachment comes to reinforce this idea. Oh, really? He really is a bad guy. And he's corrupt, and now he's trying to get a foreign leader to give him dirt on his political opponent, which is really ironic to say because that's exactly what they did.
And now they sit back and talk about the Democrats wring their hands over being so concerned about the weaponization of these agencies when that's exactly what they do. And this is they have the demonstrated track record of having done that on multiple occasions during the Trump administration. I mean, they attempted to overthrow the President of the United States, the duly elected president, 45th President of the United States. They attempted to overthrow him. That was a coup attempt. And it was orchestrated by Barack Obama. Now, Hillary Clinton was involved in it as well. She was a willing participant. She was not an unwitting accomplice or any of that. She was a willing partner in that effort, along with many in the IC, high-profile principals like James Comey, the FBI director, like Brennan, CIA director, what's his name from the DIA, Clapper, and then you had some underlings there, people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, FBI, DOJ, all of these, Bill Priestap, Bruce and Nellie, or a laundry list of folks that were all part of this cabal of people that were engaged in an effort to overthrow the duly elected president of the United States. Now, they're trying to make that go away. Memory hole, that never happened, but it was never enough for them to be able to hang their hat on as an impeachment predicate. They couldn't get there because they knew, because of Mueller's work, and Mueller was he was not he didn't have full control of his faculties.
It was like a foreshadowing of what we were going to face with Biden for 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I think they put him there knowing what his mental capacity was, with the hopes that they could just, ramrod this review and be able to say, yep, it's legit, let's go forward and impeach.
Right.
Didn't work out that way, so they had to find some other thing. So the Russia hoax, melted in front of their eyes, and that was what they had pinned their hopes on. That became non-viable as an impeachment predicate. So they had to do something else. So they cooked up this Ukraine scandal. And here's how you know what the Democrats are doing. They accuse you of doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Therefore, they're like, for example, they accuse Trump of misdealings in Ukraine. Who was really doing misdealings in Ukraine? Well, that was one Joe Biden and his son Hunter.
Yeah.
Those were the two. And Joe Biden said it, bragged about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right there on that panel. I can still see him. We've all seen the clip, him sitting there on stage.
So James Comey and John Brennan have recently gone on, national TV, and they've talked about how they're in communication with these lifers in the FBI or the Intel community and that sort of thing, and they're telling them to hold on for one more day or it's going to get better and that sort of thing. James Comey recently indicted for the seashell photo, 8647. A judge a couple of days ago or today, I can't remember, has moved his trial from July, granted his request to move it from July to October. What are your thoughts on James Comey? In terms, I know what your thoughts are in general of him as a human being and his character, but 8647, I kind of look at, I arguably, Rick, what I look at, I look at somebody like James Comey and I say, okay, he's arguably one of the nation's, most powerful spies, a former spy. I look at these heads of these intel, and I know FBI is not supposed to be intel, it's domestic, but come on, to me, it's the modern day general. Your modern day general who has troops loyal to him that are embedded in the government. and this guy goes out and we're told finds 8647, according to his story, takes a photo of it. I mean, I'm very comfortable with him being indicted for whatever, because I think it's reasonable, and I don't think the indictment alleges this, but I think it's reasonable to suggest that he could be sending coded messages to people within the government.
Well, so I think my opinion of Comey is he's a complete scumbag. I've probably shared that sentiment with you before. I think he's not stupid, but he's extremely childish, and it's hard for me to imagine someone in the position that he's been in throughout his career and with the education that he has that still conducts himself like an 8th grader on social media.
Yeah.
Like, grow up, dude. I mean, you're going to look, I just happened upon this, shell formation. Grow up, man. You owe the American people more than this. Whether you hate Trump or not is neither here nor there. That is so ridiculously inane and immature that it's a disgrace. However, innocuous you may feel that it was, that you're so stupid and immature that you would actually do it. Whether it's enough to build a case on him, I don't know. I think that there's plenty of other stuff.
Yeah,
sure,
that's true.
Yeah,
this is to me probably like, Al Capone going after him on tax evasion.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I don't know if that sticks. I'd love to see him, with an orange jumpsuit and holding up a name and a number. I don't think this is enough to get him there. But there's plenty of material to work with that would get him there, along with his buddies Jim Clapper, John Brennan, and some of these others.
Yeah. But listen, folks, it was about his wife who used to be a server in a restaurant and 86 that order. That's what he said. He went on CNN and said that. So
on that,
what
though,
are you trying to
what
do?
do you think of Todd Blanche? I mean, the SPLC case was pretty incredible in terms of they've been essentially false flagging the nation for decades, which is interesting. But what are your thoughts on Todd Blanche? Do you think that he's going to move against these deep state lifers?
He's showing a lot more propensity for aggressive prosecution than what Pam Bondi did. We'll see. I mean, I hope he's somebody that really goes after and tries to root these just really rotten to the core individuals. This is a deep, deep rot in our government. And it's not by accident. They're there for the reasons we've discussed. They got there in the ways that we've discussed. And they're not going anywhere unless we have a very aggressive attorney general that says, yep, you are going somewhere. And so I'm hoping that he's that guy.
So Catherine Herridge has this report about how the CIA was monitoring Tulsi Gabbard's Diggs group. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, as somebody who's, you're the chairman, your committee, Intel, is oversight. I'm not saying that it's unprecedented. I suspect it's probably not, but it's been public. It's public knowledge now, if her report is accurate, that they were pushing back against some of her mandates, whether it was JFK assassination, RFK assassination, COVID origin, direct energy weapons. And I'm probably leaving one out. But
even unconfirmed reports about her office being raided, which we found out that was not really true.
Not raided, but the boxes apparently were taken back. What are your thoughts on this? What do you do in this situation?
So I think you've kind of got to revisit the entire history of the DNI, which is not long. The DNI is a result of the 9/11 Commission review and recommendation, and it was 2005, I believe, when they stood up the ODNI and the first DNI was named. Tulsi is the first DNI to actually be a DNI. The rest were figureheads.
Yeah.
She took the job seriously, which is why it's a big loss for us. She was doing the job. See, the rest of them were occupying a chair. And like, well, look at me. They were rubber stamping, they were doing whatever, but they never really were. If you look at the org chart, here's the DNI, here's the rest of the IC. They never took that mandate. Never. She's the first one that said, here's what we're going to do, and started doing it. And that really upset some people. So she started the DIG, that's the Directors Initiative Group, to do, very aptly named, to start digging. But we have to go back to 2005 when the ODNI was stood up. They never did create their own computer system network. They operated on the CIA system, still do.
Wow.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's where you run into problems. And so it's not necessarily to say that the CIA is monitoring in as much as you're on the same network. Yep. That's probably true. So I'm not going to characterize this by saying that the CIA has got some sort of op that they're running against the DNI. I don't think that would be appropriate to make that characterization or any kind of assessment. But when you're on the same network, then it's safe to say you've probably got some accesses that, that's where that's the mistake I think that was made when they stood up the ODNI. Prior to that, you had the Director of Central Intelligence. The last Director of Central Intelligence was Porter Goss. When they stood up the ODNI, they named him CIA Director, and then the DNI was named. And I can't even remember who the DNI was, but on the org chart, the DNI is supposed to be the administrative overseer of the intelligence community. That is the traffic cop that makes sure everybody, all the lanes are working like they should, that everybody's communicating together as they should. And nobody took that mandate seriously until Tulsi Gabbard.
So is it your? I would say it's probably fair to say it's your assessment that there needs to be a wall put in by the next DNI.
I think they're working on that, and that again, I think she was working toward that, and was a lot of the reason why she was not necessarily sitting at the cool kids table.
Yeah.
I mean, you said that there's not you wouldn't characterize it as an op against her, but it sounds to me like there doesn't have to be an op, because as we were talking about earlier, if you've got these people who are embedded that haven't been fired, I think we've got a lot of honestly just card-carrying communists.
So
if they're using the same computer systems, the question is why would they do that? It's why wouldn't they do that if there's people that are trying to protect the CIA's dirty laundry.
Also, look at the ODNI construct. The ODNI was never stood up to be an operational entity. So what was it supposed to be? Well, it was supposed to be comprised of essentially embeds from various elements of the IC. So you've got people from the FBI embedded. You've got people from the CIA embedded. You've got the DIA and various defense elements. There are 18 IC elements, agencies within the intelligence community. The big ones that we think about are the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. Those are always the three that we think about. But you've got the DIA, you've got the Department of Energy, you've got Treasury, you've got DOJ, you've got all the military branches. Each have their own intelligence agency. You've got the DEA. You've got. I could go through and list all of them, but they all comprise the IC writ large, which means every one of them have embeds into the ODNI. So any one of them could be reporting back to their parent agency and are, which is also part of the problem. And you need the subject matter expertise, the institutional understanding that resides in specific agencies. You've got the real technical stuff that you deal with in the NGA and the NRO, that we don't even hear about. That's dealing with a lot of the overhead stuff, the NSA. There's a lot of technical stuff that the ODNI needs, that expertise, that subject matter expertise. But we also need to understand how the CIA works. Okay, we're going to bring in some detailees to come in, and they're going to work for us for a year or two. Well, they work for the CIA. They just happen to be detailed or embedded with ODNI. Therefore, that conduit of communication back to the parent agency is still very robust.
Right. They've got eyes and ears in their boss's office.
Sure. And so when you talk about, a raid, first off, the CIA doesn't raid anything. The CIA never does it. They always find somebody else to do it. Okay? I mean, so the CIA is, and first off, CIA is not a law enforcement agency. They don't have any authority to raid anything. But they do have a presence in the ODNI. And could they do a review of documents in custody of the ODNI and say, we think we have a legitimate claim to these documents in this box, in this file box here. We're going to take this back to the CIA. And the DNI says, okay, and doesn't challenge that because maybe she did a legal review and said, yep, you do have a legitimate right to those documents, and I'm not going to contest that. And so we've got some irresponsible individuals that characterize that as a raid. Maybe I would have been more comfortable at least keeping copies of those documents. Mm-hmm. But the legal back and forth that takes place between agencies, it may have been, not a hill to die on. If you follow what I'm thinking, it's like, okay, I'm not going to get into a legal spat over something, particularly when my attorneys might be advising me, don't go there because you're going to lose. Go ahead and let them have the documents. Okay, that's not a raid. And then, I'm not, I don't want to downplay this, but I also don't want to throw kerosene on it.
Yeah.
The reality is the connections between these agencies exist. And if you have an FBI detailee working for the CIA, which they are, there's a good chance that FBI detailee is telling everything back to the boss. Mm-hmm. That's normal. So what is it that this FBI detailee has to offer the CIA that the CIA couldn't do by themselves? Well, they got a badge and a gun, for one thing. The CIA doesn't. Mm-hmm. So that's why you have these interactions between agencies, because authorities can be limiting factors. The CIA has no domestic authority. The only way they can do anything is in partnership with a domestic agency or an agency that has domestic authority. That could be the FBI, it could be the Marshals, it could be the Secret Service, it could be any, HSI, it could be any number of agencies that they need to partner with because they've got some problem they're trying to get after, and their authorities are limited to foreign targets. Right. And even on foreign targets, they don't necessarily have any kind of legal adjudicative authority. So that's where these relationships are important.
Let me ask you about bringing the Intel oligarchy to heel. If we get 2 years down the road from where we are now, and there's really no accountability, we haven't had those handcuff moments, perp walks or whatever. Right. Whether it's Comey, Brennan, any of those guys that you've mentioned, what does that mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to the American people when we voted for accountability, but we don't actually get it because maybe the system depends on this corruption? I don't know.
Well, I think what you have in each of these agencies, and it's depending on the agency, it's worse than in some than others. But there is an institutional center of gravity that tends to get a hold of the individual. That's very, very difficult to overcome this gravitational pull that's created. And when you have somebody like Tulsi Gabbard who essentially defied gravity and said, we're going to do it this way, the reason that she was able to do that is because of the construct of the ODNI, separate and apart from overseeing. She took that job serious and said, looking at the org chart, I'm actually over these guys. I'm not a partner with them. Want to have a good relationship, want to do the things that the president asked me to do, and I'm going to exercise that as the top of the org chart.
Right.
Nobody ever did that before. So that center of gravity didn't necessarily exist in the same context as it does in other agencies. So she was able to overcome that, and in doing that, kind of ruffled the feathers of the principles of several other agencies. Like, we don't like it. It wasn't even the principles in many cases. It was that middle management that we talked about that are, ideologically aligned with a certain president, and so therefore they are put into the bureaucracy in perpetuity, and they're there to do the bidding of a particular administration. And those people rise to the level of the 7th floor, and they want to park there and stay there. And that's where that center of gravity exists. And it's a hard thing to overcome. And it's going to take somebody with the intestinal fortitude of a Tulsi Gabbard to first recognize it, and second, say, I'm going to overcome that. You know, if I got to put on my moon boots or whatever it is I got to do to defy gravity, that's what I'm going to do. And she was willing to do it. And in my opinion, she's going to be a tough act to follow.
Sure.
It's going to have to be somebody that recognizes what she was trying to do.
Sounds like you
supports it.
You recognize that, Rick. Sounds like you would be a great choice.
Let's get this clip to the president.
Yeah, let's do it.
I am not lobbying for that job because the reality is it would imperil the majority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I get it. I mean, and we don't want that. Like in terms of we don't want to have to see, you know, impeachment 3 and 4 and all and everything that they're going to do. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, Mark Wayne Mullen, obviously, that was one that I've heard nothing but good things out of his new direction there. I think that he was following a much different situation. You know, she. You know, I'm not going to talk ill of her, but you know, she was. It was all about her on a horse and all of this stuff. And Mark Wayne Mullen's he's not about that life.
Mark Wayne Mullen has whatever anybody thinks about him. He's a self-made man. He has an abundance of common sense. He's a personable guy that, you know, I've known for years. Have a good relationship with him, and actually quite a bit in common. I mean, you know, going back to some of the rodeo days and whatnot, he's kind of done an awful lot of the same things. But the other interesting thing about how he ended up in that position is because you knew that governor was going to appoint a senator immediately to backfill that would be a Republican. Easy. Well, that's what happens on the Senate side. You know, if you go to a Republican state, I need this guy to come serve in the administration. The Republican president's going to go, okay, and they're going to put in a Republican senator, and they're going to do it quickly.
Sure.
You don't appoint a member of the House temporarily. So it would require a special election, and that takes time.
Yeah.
That can't happen in 2 or 3 weeks. That has to, because you can't appoint an interim member of Congress like you can a senator. You just can't do that. It has to be an election. So there would have to be a special election, and it's conceivable that, and this is why this is not even, I think, a tenable position. It's conceivable that with our margins as they are now, you could lose the majority in real time and throw everything into chaos.
Yeah. It's not as if Arkansas 1 would flip to a Democrat
No,
once the special election would happen. It's the fact that you don't have that Speaker of the House vote. You know, when it comes time to
100%, and that's really the issue. And I mean, but I am just honored and thrilled to be in the position I'm in to chair the Intel Committee, and it's for things like this. I mean, it's being able to work with somebody like Tulsi, and I hope that whoever comes after her is as formidable and committed as she's been.
Well, I know we're short on time, but we wanted to talk about some rotisserie chicken.
Oh, real quick, yeah. Tell us about hot rotisserie chicken versus cold rotisserie chicken.
So,
and you really, I know you guys have got somewhere you have to be. So
here's the thing about this. You know, you can debate about SNAP benefits, food stamps, all day. People have, you know, I'm for rooting out fraud. I'm for all that. But it's okay to buy cold rotisserie chicken with food stamps. But you can't buy hot rotisserie chicken. How does that make sense?
It does not.
I don't know. They're like $5 too. You know,
well,
they're really handy.
And
here's the other thing. You just nailed it right there. They are so cheap. I can buy a hot rotisserie chicken for $5 or $6, or I can go over to the chicken case in the meat aisle, and buy a whole chicken that costs more, and I got to cook it.
Yeah.
The value that you get out of a hot rotisserie chicken. So if we're about trying to deliver taxpayer value, this is the way to go.
Right.
And quite frankly, I'm a big fan of hot rotisserie chicken.
Me too, man.
Yeah,
I love
I'm
it.
Say.
In full disclosure, I spent the last 2 hours doing 2 recipes, which we'll have out on video, where I used hot rotisserie chicken to show how to make. I did a chicken enchilada casserole, and then I did some chicken pot pies.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so we'll have that up, the video, and we'll send you a link to it when it's done. But we literally just did that because the value of being able to do this, and we're trying to get people who are using SNAP benefits to make better food choices.
Yeah.
And give them some ideas. I'll tell you this: you can put a hot rotisserie chicken on the table, back it up with some mashed potatoes and green beans, and that's a meal.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And
is.
it costs. It's a great value not only to the people that are eating that meal, but to the taxpayers who are supporting the programs.
Yeah.
So I think it's a win all the way around.
Yeah, well, you can grab a chicken, you can pull the meat, use it for different things. Yep. My wife will make quesadillas with them, as you mentioned there.
Chicken salad.
Oh,
chicken salad.
Yeah, you can do chicken tacos, all that stuff. We could go on.
So this is a
on
piece
and
of
on,
legislation that's going in the Farm Bill to try to
would allow for that.
Yeah. It passed the House. It's in the Farm Bill.
Okay.
In the House version. I can't imagine the Senate's going to try to strip that out. This thing passed. I mean, there were like 35 people that didn't vote for it. And I came home and my daughter, she's like, Dad, who are those 35 people that voted against hot rotisserie chicken? Because she was hearing about it at school.
Wow.
Yeah. So
You
just
know?
people that are just automatic no votes
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine the Senate's going to go, let's die on that hill. But you never know.
Well,
That's the Senate.
we all understand the cupcakes, Little Debbie cupcakes versus,
They say they say that candy and soda have actually decreased in price because less people are buying them.
amazing.
And now that you can't use the SNAP benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
but you can go get a cake mix and make a
That's
cake.
right.
You're welcome to do that.
That's right.
But rather than
Ingredients versus the finished product. So
Right,
yeah.
I can't go and buy a birthday cake, but I can go buy a cake mix and make a birthday cake.
There you go.
There you
Okay,
go.
fair enough.
I think taxpayers can get behind that.
Congressman Rick Crawford, I know you got to go. Thanks so much. We appreciate
You
it.
bet. Enjoyed it.